When I married Jerry, I was fortunate to inherit some real estate from my grandparents. They suggested I use it to secure our future, but they also advised me to keep it confidential, even from Jerry. They believed it was prudent to have a passive income that only I knew about, ensuring I would always have financial security. Regrettably, Jerry has often overstepped boundaries when it comes to possessions and finances. For instance, he has attempted to redistribute gifts I bought for my parents to his parents, aiming to enhance his image. His actions distressed me, especially when he reacted strongly to being confronted with the truth. Recently, a significant incident raised my concerns further. I discovered that $22,000 had been withdrawn from an account I manage intended for our living expenses. This account was supposed to complement the income Jerry contributed to our household. I had no recollection of making such a large withdrawal, leading me to the inevitable conclusion that Jerry must have taken the money. When I confronted him about the missing funds, he casually admitted that he had lent the money to his mother, Kayla, who was facing some troubles. He did this without my knowledge or consent. This revelation was quite shocking, as it not only involved a large sum of money but also demonstrated a lack of communication and respect for our mutual financial decisions. Such actions have made me reconsider our relationship dynamics. If our marriage cannot be built on mutual respect and transparency, particularly regarding finances, it might be necessary to reevaluate our future together. The idea that what one spouse acquires automatically belongs to the other without discussion is not a sustainable way to manage a marriage. If this approach remains unacceptable, then perhaps, regrettably, the solution might be to consider a separation. It's all right, I suppose. After all, the money was mine that I earned through hard work. We do have some savings, so the loss of that amount shouldn't be catastrophic. If Kayla was indeed facing difficulties, I understand the need to help. However, a simple conversation with me beforehand would have been appreciated. The account is jointly ours, after all. Had Jerry withdrawn the money from a personal account he set up before we were married, I wouldn't have minded. But taking such a significant sum from our shared account without any discussion felt like a breach of trust. When I expressed my disappointment, Jerry's response was dismissive. He frowned, clearly irritated, and promised somewhat reluctantly to inform me next time before taking such actions. He then quickly excused himself to the bathroom. This situation left me feeling uneasy. It wasn't like the early days of our marriage when Jerry would listen sincerely and value my input. Is this what change looks like in a marriage? A few days later, circumstances led me to my in-laws' home to deliver a package mistakenly sent to our address. My mother-in-law, Amy, greeted me warmly and invited me in for tea, an invitation I felt compelled to accept despite intending just to leave the package at the door. While there, I couldn't help but notice several luxurious items around their house, expensive cosmetics, stylish clothing, and various health products. Amy casually mentioned that these were gifts from Jerry. The realization hit me hard. The missing $22,000 from our account had been used quite extravagantly. It seemed the concept of necessity had been stretched far, and the casualness with which this spending was treated made me question not only our financial partnership but the underlying respect and communication within our marriage. Upon learning that Jerry had lent the money to his mother, Kayla, because she was in need, I tried to understand the situation. However, discovering that the funds were spent on luxury items didn't sit well with me. As I sat quietly sipping my tea, the atmosphere shifted noticeably. My in-laws' smiles faded, and they looked at me with an odd mixture of fear and accusation. My son is such a wonderful, generous boy, always buying gifts for me, my mother-in-law started, her tone turning confrontational. But what about you? As his wife, are you taking good care of my wonderful son? There seems to be some trouble, I hear. He mentioned getting a lot of blame from you for using the money to help me. It became clear then, Jerry had painted himself as a victim in front of his parents, a good son merely helping out his mother, which explained their fearful and defensive attitude toward me. This revelation exhausted my patience not just with my in-laws, but with Jerry as well. I had never anticipated such a lack of support and understanding in my marriage, pushing me to consider divorce seriously. I started envisioning a future where, post-divorce, I would move back to my parents' home, a 2-story structure over 32 years old, designed before my brother was born. It used to house our family of 5 comfortably, but now it stood largely empty and was becoming impractical for my aging parents, who struggled with mobility. The house had some modifications like handrails, but its spacious layout was more challenging to navigate for them. A 1-story house would be far more suitable for their needs. With the financial security from my passive income, I could rebuild their home into something more comfortable and accessible. Filled with a mix of resolve and relief, I called my parents to discuss my plans for a divorce and the idea of reconstructing their house. Surprisingly, my parents weren't shocked by the news of the divorce. Their reaction only solidified my decision, as it seemed they too understood the need for a change, supporting my desire to start anew and build a better environment for our family. The news of rebuilding their home brought genuine joy to my parents. Over the phone, I could sense their happiness as they thanked me. "I'm glad that you're planning to rebuild it for us. Thank you," they said. They reassured me that even if they couldn't live there for long, it wouldn't be a problem, as I could eventually take over the house since it was funded by my income. "Well then, I'll start preparing and planning it bit by bit," I replied, encouraged by their support. "Take it easy, just don't overdo it," they advised, their words lifting my spirits instantly. As I began organizing the rebuild of my parents' house, I awaited a response from the construction company. However, before any progress was made, Jerry confronted me aggressively. "How dare you use our savings to build a house without telling me anything about it?" he accused as we sat across from each other at the living room table. He banged his fist on the table, his voice rising without any regard for my feelings. "Well, my parents will live in the new house," I stated firmly. "That's impossible because it was built for my parents to live in," he retorted. He insisted that since the house was built with what he perceived as our common property, his parents had a right to live in it too. "Are you planning to cram 5 people into that little 1-story house? Just give me the house then," Jerry demanded, hitting the table louder. Fearing his reaction if he discovered the passive income I had kept secret, I decided it was time to reveal the entire truth. "To tell you the truth, I have passive income," I confessed. "I've been saving from the real estate gifted to me by my grandparents. I've paid for the rebuild with that passive income, so I didn't take a penny out of our common property." Feeling guilty for breaking a promise to my grandparents to keep this a secret, I watched as Jerry's reaction turned even more intense. He shook his shoulders in anger and pounded the table harder. "What a bad wife you are, hiding the fact that you have an income. You play around with my money and protect your own like that by keeping secrets." His words stung, but they also clarified the deep issues in our marriage, issues of trust, respect, and shared goals, all of which seemed increasingly insurmountable. Seeing Jerry's face flush with rage, I suddenly grasped why my grandparents had advised me to keep my passive income a secret. Perhaps they had seen something in Jerry that I hadn't recognized until now. "I'll take the house as alimony. Besides, any house you build while we're married is mine too. I am the head of the family, and if you disobey me, I will divorce you," he declared arrogantly. I was overwhelmed with dismay. How had I spent so many years with a man who could so easily disregard my feelings and contributions? Initially, I had planned to use the passive income for our future, especially if Jerry's earnings were insufficient, or if I was unable to work due to injury or illness. It was meant to be a safety net to support both of us, something I intended to share with him when the time was right. But now I no longer wished to use that money on him. Fed up, I stood up and left the house, needing space from the stifling atmosphere. I spent the night at a business hotel to clear my head and plan my next steps. Upon returning home the next morning, Jerry was waiting with a sly, unsettling smile. He approached me smirking and presented a sheet of paper he had been hiding. It was a set of divorce papers already filled out. "You're lying about your passive income, aren't you? You lied about it to cover up that you were taking money from our common property, didn't you?" He accused. His accusations were baseless and repetitive. Despite my honesty and the real existence of my passive income, he refused to believe me. "It's the truth. I have passive income," I insisted, but it was clear he was stuck in his narrative. Jerry's inability to trust and respect my words was the final straw, clarifying that this marriage could not provide the support or partnership I needed. The path forward seemed inevitable, and I braced myself for the next difficult steps of legally untangling our lives. Jerry forced the divorce papers into my hand with a smirk, confidently saying, "You'll let me know when we can move in, okay?" He then patted me on the shoulder, walked out the door, humming cheerily, and mentioned he was going out for a drink. At that moment, it became crystal clear who Jerry really was. Throughout our marriage, he had concealed his disdain for me, never truly valuing my feelings or perspectives. This realization stung, but it also freed me. I didn't hesitate. I immediately packed my belongings, filled out the divorce papers right there, and left our home. I moved in with my parents temporarily, explaining the entire situation to them. We agreed I would stay with them until the new house was completed. The next day, I noticed my phone was inundated with missed calls from Jerry, and then he called again. I answered, hoping it would be our final conversation. "Hello, hey, all your stuff is gone, you know," he said with an impatient tone, seemingly confused by my actions. But why was he panicking? He had pushed for the divorce after all. "We are getting a divorce, so it's normal. I won't ever come back, so please use the empty spaces as you," I told him, hoping to make my intentions clear. There was a pause. Perhaps at that moment, Jerry finally realized that I had a source of income he hadn't controlled. Then, switching to an unusually sweet voice, one I had never heard before, he pleaded, "Hey, can you let my parents live in the new house? I don't care if I have to live with your parents, please." I was stunned. "I already told you it's a small one-story house," I reminded him, "and it's meant as a surprise for my parents." His suggestion was absurd. Not only was he proposing to give away a house he hadn't bought, but to also announce it as if it were his to give. His reckless disregard for the truth was baffling. "You don't care about the savings, do you? You have no idea how much I worried about the money I would give to you as an allowance and the money I saved for our living expenses," he continued. This conversation only solidified my decision. Jerry's understanding of our finances and our relationship was completely skewed. It was clear that moving forward without him was not only a choice, but a necessity. As I explained to Jerry the efforts I had put into managing our finances and trying to make ends meet, he disregarded the significance of my struggles. "That has nothing to do with what's happening here. You are just careless with money and leave only the hassle to other people. And you present to your parents as if you prepared everything by yourself, right?" I confronted him, highlighting his tendency to take credit for my efforts. Jerry's response, or rather his sudden silence, only intensified my frustration. It was clear he was trying to paint himself as the orchestrator of everything and wanted to gift the house I built for my parents to his own, capitalizing on my sincerity to impress them. It was both shallow and deceptive. "In the end, you're just trying to take advantage of my goodwill and claim my property. There is no justification for you to trample on my feelings and intentions like this. I will not give you the house that I built with all my heart and soul for my parents just so you can show off," I declared firmly, rejecting his plea outright. Jerry grew louder, perhaps in desperation. "But husbands and wives are supposed to help each other. I'll tell them that you built it, please." "We're not a married couple anymore, are we? We are strangers now since I already filed for a divorce," I reminded him, reinforcing the boundaries that his actions had necessitated. On the day Jerry handed me the divorce papers, I submitted them to the city office immediately. He had been the one pushing for a divorce, and yet When faced with the reality of our separation, he seemed incredulous. "Yeah, you already filed it. Why are you so surprised when you're the one who asked for the divorce?" "Oh, I didn't think you would leave me. Hey, let's start over. Let's talk it out and try to be a good couple this time," he pleaded, as if unaware of the gravity of his previous actions. How could he say such a thing now? This was a man who had squandered our savings on his mother, threatened me with divorce, and ridiculed me to the very end. Reconciliation was out of the question. "No, thank you. Please give my regards to your parents," I said brightly as I ended the call. The next day, my phone was flooded with voicemails and messages from Jerry, still demanding that we get back together. His persistence was as baffling as it was unwelcome, affirming my decision to move forward without him. Jerry claimed that we could still start over and that he loved me, but I sensed his interest lay more in my property and fortune than in our relationship. To sever ties completely, I blocked all his contact information as well as that of his parents. Meanwhile, the construction of the new house was completed and my parents and I moved in. We are now living comfortably in the home I built. Sometime later, I met with a mutual friend who was also acquainted with Jerry, and I shared the news of our divorce. My friend offered words of sympathy and updated me on what had transpired with Jerry and his family. It turned out that Jerry had abruptly resigned from his job, claiming he no longer needed to work hard because he had acquired real estate. However, unable to contact him, his company was left in a bind. The next day, Jerry attempted to retract his resignation, but his bosses, frustrated by his unexplained disappearance and the problems it caused, lectured him. They demanded an explanation, but Jerry, unable to admit he had been banking on my income, lied about his circumstances. Eventually, the truth about our divorce surfaced and his fabrications were exposed. His company refused to rehire him, realizing he had tried to manipulate the situation for his gain. Jerry, who had previously scoffed at my passive income, suggesting it was probably a lie, was now in a precarious position. He returned to live with his parents, who were understandably upset with him. Now, he's struggling to find a new job, marred by his dubious departure from his previous employment. It seems he's facing the consequences of his actions. As for me, life has moved in a positive direction. I'm living with my parents in the house I built, working in a job I've always wanted, and enjoying life. The passive income I had been saving for our future together will now be used to support those who have stood by me. This turn of events has brought me a sense of renewal and peace, affirming that moving on was the best decision for my well-being.